Woohoo! We're going to let the music play a little bit longer, boys. The playoffs, the music can go on for a little bit longer. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into another Celtics Talk Weekly post-game show. I am your host, Rob Atain. With me, I got my man Xavier and Zach, a.k.a. the Celtics fan page, joining us in. Boys, the Celtics defeat the Miami Heat at home, 114-94, as they take game one of the first round of the Eastern Conference quarterfinals. A good game all around, a weird fourth quarter stretch that I'm interested and excited to talk about with you guys. However, you guys know how this thing goes. Before we kind of dive into it, our initial, thoughts, reactions, and takeaways, Xavier.
Yeah, I thought this was a great first game for Boston. I was a little concerned once Jimmy Butler was ruled officially out that this team kind of needs an edge to it, right? They need to play a game that's competitive for them to wake up for it. But I think things are different now. This is the playoffs. Joe Mazzulla's talked all season long that this is the crescendo. Everything leads up to playoff basketball. And what you've seen in the regular season is kind of just a sample size. And in the playoff, everything's about to be rectified. And it felt like that throughout this game when the threes weren't necessarily falling for a stretch. The shots in general, they were like 3 for 17 at one point in the last 20 shots. They started to attack the basket more. And eventually the threes were falling, and they were falling in bunches. The corners were left wide open, and Sam Hauser took advantage. Payton Pritchard took advantage. The whole team took advantage. And I think the dribble penetration was top-notch, and Miami tried to muck it up with zone at different points in this game. It didn't seem to work because Boston's shooting is on such another level. And then Kristaps Porzingis is the ultimate zone buster, and that proved time and time again throughout this game. He's the difference maker. And everyone said it all season long, but I think it's different to prove it, especially in a meaningful game one against the team that has haunted you for the past few seasons. I think Boston executed well throughout this game. I think the Celtics should be happy with their 1-0 series lead.
Yeah, I mean, I think you summed it up best. I don't have too much to add on that, but I think one of the things I liked a lot was the way Drew Holiday played, specifically on Tyler Herro. Obviously, fourth quarter, you don't love to see the 30-point lead disappear, but that's why you do build those leads. And I thought they did a good job of not letting it get too out of control, eventually building it back up to 20 and just finishing it out.
I thought they played a phenomenal 42 minutes of basketball tonight, and I thought it was a great game one. I think that, you really set the tone for where your approach is this series. I loved the intensity that I saw out of Jaylen Brown. I think sometimes he got a little too excited there late in the first quarter, but I think he slowed down. I mean, Jason Tatum, guys, to me tonight was on another level. And I think in the box, obviously it showed with the triple-double. His scoring numbers weren't as high. You figure a couple more threes fall his way. He's looking at a 30-point triple-double opposed to a 20-point triple-double. I thought his shot selection was super, super sound. His playmaking, oh my God. I mean, it was really the reason as to why the Celtics were kind of able to extend that lead. And really why they came out so hot. I think you saw the Celtics kind of struggle in the first quarter once he sat down and hit the bench, because the attention he was drawing from that Miami defense was truly remarkable in my opinion. I thought Tatum really set the tone for the Celtics. Payton Pritchard, I want to talk about Payton Pritchard. We were talking about him so much, and I know, Xavier, you're so happy because on the report cards video, this man gave him, I believe, B+. And after today's performance, I can back you up on that so far, because Payton Pritchard has reached another level, and I cannot praise him enough. Tonight, it felt like he was doing all the little things for the Celtics off the bench, guys. And how important is PP going to be for the season moving forward, Xavier? I'll let you have this one.
Yeah, there was a play, I believe it was in the first half. There was a loose ball, and he just got in there. And, Kevin Love was there, and Bam was there, and he just kind of got in there and forced it to remain Boston ball. And it's just little things like that mean so much. And to be honest with you, I think they should have let him have the ball a little bit more in transition. I think there was a few times he was open, and Brown had his head down and didn't let Pritchard get to the controls there. But I think what he does best is set the tone, and I've talked about this a few times. His pace is ridiculous. He can fly around the court. He's an Energizer bunny, really, but he's controlled. Where O'Shea Brissett can be that guy and kind of lose his ability to focus on the game, Pritchard has that. Pritchard has the ability to lock in, understand the moment, know when to push the pace, know, okay, even if I can't get something at the cup, I can pass this out and get a great transition three look out of this. And I think tonight we saw that. And I'm just glad, hopefully this continues, because he's a guy that you need to be on his A game at all times. You need Pritchard, because I think, in my opinion, he's the most important bench guy. You saw with Hauser tonight. I'm glad he got it going, and we can talk about Hauser in a little bit. He hit those 4 threes, but after those first 2 misses, it was getting a little worrisome, because if you don't have Hauser doing what he does best, which is knock down triples in the corner, what does he bring you? Because he was getting attacked defensively tonight, and I think that's something we could talk about a little bit later. So then your bench becomes Al Horford and Peyton Pritchard, and you can't just rely on 6 guys. So who's going to be that 7th? Who's going to be that 8th guy? And if Pritchard can solidify himself at minimum to be a consistent 7th option, this team is borderline unbeatable.
I think that you're on the money with Pritch. And honestly, I'll save it, but some of the fourth quarter lapses we get calm. I think some of those guys like Pritchard and Hauser could really save you in those minutes.
I agree.
Because when you look at the Celtics tonight, it was very apparent that they got bored. Their energy went down. The guarding got a little quiet. They're up by 30. And what does Miami do? We say it all the time. Miami is the best team in the league at sniffing blood. They smelt that. And what did they do? They went out there. They put the 31-point lead down to 15 before Missoula timeout. Eventually got the Celtics back up to 20. But something I was thinking about when I was watching this, Zach, was like, at what point, if you're Missoula, do you think, all right, you know what? Yes, you're Jason Tatum. Yes, you're Jaylen Brown, but we are up by 30. I need players that are going to bring energy. I need players that are going to push the pace. I need players that are going to, really extend this lead and keep the energy high, because yes, they are your best players, but it kind of feels like at times they get a little bored out there.
I mean, if you're up by 30 with 5 minutes left, why are your starters in? Because they probably don't care, like you said, even though it is a playoff game. And then you saw, with, I don't know, maybe it was 2.5 minutes left, Tatum takes the fall and you're up 16, 18 points. Does he need to be in the game at that point? Probably not. I guess you're right about the whole energy thing. I do think players like Brissett, Pritchard, and Hauser can definitely bring it in those situations where, maybe the game's out of hand and the energy is low. You talked about the Garden's quiet and stuff like that.
I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say, because that fourth quarter, I will say, we talked about it a lot in the last 2 weeks of the regular season about habits, building good habits, and how some of the stuff the Celtics were doing could have potentially created bad habits. The habit kind of showed up tonight, and obviously that lead was big enough and significant enough where the Heat weren't able to kind of knock on the door and really open it and step in. But what if that leads 20 and that, that 18-2 run puts the lead to 4 opposed to, what I'm saying? So for you guys, obviously it's game 1, and the best thing for this team is to have that happen in game 1 against the Miami Heat versus, a game 3 against the Denver Nuggets. But for you guys, is that a kind of a sign that maybe this team developed a bad habit, or maybe it's just a lapse and you're thinking to yourself they're going to fix this as the playoffs progress?
I think it's a few things. I think, of course, it's a bad habit that they need to rectify, but I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with being complacent up 30 with like 5 minutes left.
Right.
The record is whatever in 0 in those situations in NBA history, right? There's never been a 30-point comeback in 5 minutes in a playoff game. So I understand that, if you're Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, you think the job's done. And I feel like at that point, you need at least Pritchard, Hauser, Tillman, 2 of those 3 guys to be in the game with the starters,
right,
to at least get the energy up a little bit. And then Joe Mazzulla also wasn't calling a timeout either. So he could have rectified it, and he didn't. And we know that's his gimmick. But regardless, if there's any time I actually agreed with Mazzulla doing that, I think today was a good example. Because I think they're up 30. They let it dwindle all the way down. And I think that was a good wake-up call to see, hey, guys, this is what happens when you get complacent. If you get complacent, they're going to come back. They're going to roar back. So I think in a weird way, his mentality of doing that finally worked a little bit, because this game was kind of out of hand, but it was still a good learning opportunity. And it's game 1 of a playoffs where you need to win 16 games. And you know that this series, you're probably going to win in less than 6 games because it's a super banged up Miami Heat team. And so I don't mind it, but it's going to be a little bit different if, let's say, that lead is 15, and even if another team hits 2 threes, right, and it's a 9-point game, it's not a big lead, but regardless, if it's a 9-point game, how does Joe react? And it's kind of all these things I'm looking at. Tonight, I felt like was kind of a trial run. But again, we talked about this all season. It's always a trial run with this team, right? We're just waiting for the playoffs. But now it's like, okay, we're waiting for next round. But then it's Orlando and Cleveland. So then we're waiting for the conference finals. And then what happens if New York makes it? And Boston's talent differential with them is so big. So then you're waiting for the finals. At what point you just put your foot on the gas and say, okay, we know we're better than everyone else. We're just going to prove it night in and night out and not care and just blow teams out on the way to a championship.
I'd also add that, like, it's blowing 20-point, like when you're up by 20 points, it feels like a lot. But the way that the NBA is played nowadays and the way basketball is played is you can get up 20, you can get down 20 really fast just based on how you shoot. So the Celtics open 14-0. They're like, oh, we're up 14 points. You know, the game should be over. And then Miami makes it a 5-point game or whatever it is, you know, by the end of the quarter. So it's not necessarily like I wouldn't say it's it seems like it's a Celtics specific issue, but I feel like if you look at the NBA as a whole, there's probably, like, just going back, 2 weeks, Denver blows a 20-point lead to the Spurs of all teams. And they end up losing the game. And so maybe it just feels like the Celtics do it more because they're constantly in situations where they're up 25, where there's not, a lot of teams in the NBA that get up 25. I think on the broadcast, they said that the Celtics had a 20-point lead in 41 of their games this year, or 45 of their games, or whatever it was. So if they're constantly in situations when they're up 20, and then a team makes it a 5-point game 5 times, you're like, the Celtics have let up a 20-point lead 5 times. That's a huge thing. But there's probably teams that are only up by 20 points 5 times in an entire season.
Right. So, yeah, that's a good point. You figure the more times you're up 20, the more opportunities there are for a team to make a run. I thought that I really like your point Xavier made too, where, it is a good learning opportunity for this team. You just really have to hope that they take it as a learning opportunity and they show us that they're learning. I will say, though, their mentality tonight was flawless, in my opinion. They busted the zone. The energy was totally there. You could totally see that these guys were kind of playing it with an FU mentality, this Heat team. I really, really liked how Jaylen Brown reacted to the whole Caleb Martin incident. I was very happy to see that everyone just didn't back off. When someone goes after your best player, it's good to see the second best player, or 1B, whatever you want to kind of consider him, to kind of step in there and, you just make a statement. So I do like that. I also really, again, I think that going back to that lead, I really just think it comes down to if Boston's going to play slow, I'm not necessarily mad at that, but you really have to buckle down and park the bus on defense. And I thought that when you're with this team, if you're playing slow and you're not kind of, the intensity isn't on the defensive end, then obviously the team's going to make a comeback. So again, with this team, if they're defensively focused and locked in, I'm okay with kind of maybe going a little bit complacent offensively up 30. I think the problem is if you're doing it on both ends, you're complacent on offense, you're complacent on defense, you're letting them shoot open threes. It's like then you kind of get into uncharted territory and uncharted waters where it's like, are you making a mistake? Tonight we got to do the player of the game, and it was no other than Jason Tatum. His 3rd career triple-double, his 1st career playoff triple-double. JT was really, and this is something I said, might be a hot take. In my opinion, this is one of Jason Tatum's best games I watched live. And I've seen a lot of Jason Tatum games, and I know the efficiency wasn't there, 7 for 19, but this is a prime example of how Jason Tatum's game has evolved. 2-3 years ago, a 7 for 19 game for Jason Tatum is a bad game, but he was still so obviously the best player on the court out there, and he was controlling the pace of the game, and he was dictating what was happening on both ends of the floor. And I think that's what Tatum needs to be for the Celtics team. He needs to be clearly the best player on the court every night. And you figure if Tatum's shots falling from 3, right, you have, a whole different game. So I thought tonight, Xavier, Tatum did a phenomenal job at controlling the game. The game was running at Jason Tatum's speed.
Yeah, I think this was like a B plus Tatum game, and the fact that this is his B plus is nuts at this point. That's a compliment, in my opinion, to him, because I think in the past Tatum's like B plus games were kind of like low 20 points. He'd get his rebounds, the assist numbers were kind of low, and the defense was very spotty. But I think tonight he showed that okay, he missed a bunny or two. He was 1 for 8 from distance. He still had 23 points, 10 rebounds, and 10 assists. So I feel like if you're just a little bit more clinical around the basket, this game looks a lot better. And I think if you drove to the basket a little bit more, it'd also be better. And I think Bill Simmons tweeted this during the game, is that Tatum's post-up game is ridiculous. It's elite. Yeah. It's like literally one of the best in the league. He just never goes to it. And it's inexplicable to all of us that watch this team consistently why he doesn't do it more. That's the whole thing. And maybe he's saving it for Denver. I don't know. Maybe that's Boston's big plan, is that this whole season is just a tune-up until they play Denver, and then the bag of tricks just goes crazy. But even tonight, he needed to get going a little bit. What does he do? 2 followaways towards the free throw line, cash both times. So, like, it's kind of inexplicable why he isn't scoring a little bit more, which is still crazy to say. But at the same time, he's so good that even though he's not playing up to what we think his standard should be, he's still getting these games where he's controlling the entire game. He's not panicking when he's doubled anymore. He has a plan. It felt like any time Jason Tatum used to get doubled, he'd pass to the nearest guy, and other teams would immediately read that out, and it'd be a steal every single time. And now he actually has a plan in those situations. And when he's hedged, when he has 2 guys looking at him on the wing, he has the ability to hit a cross-court pass or drive a little bit and kick out and have the confidence to make that pass and not have it tipped or anything. So that playmaking ability has really brought him to the next echelon. And I think sometimes we get annoyed with the scoring. And even tonight, it was a little bit annoying at times. But it's so clearly there. He just has to execute a little bit better, and the team has to put him in a position to do so. And I think if nothing else from this game, I'm more confident with Tatum's ability to rise to the occasion in these playoffs and play his style of basketball.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add that. I mean, I can't say it's the best Tatum game I've seen live because I was at Game 7 against Philly when he had 51. So that'll be my best one. Yeah, I was going to talk about the double team thing. I think even 2 years ago, like you said, if he gets doubled, he's creating wild passes. It seems like even now he like wants to be double teamed at times where he's like, because I know if he gets doubled, he's drawing the ball back out and he's creating shots for his teammates. And it seems like he trusts pretty much every person that's on the floor. If he's doubled, he knows he can, dish it or whatever he has to do. But yeah, I mean, I think people get caught up in the scoring numbers and they'll say, oh, he had 23 on 7 or 19, bad Tatum game. But first career triple-double, 30-point win, 20-point win, whatever it was. I can't ask for any more from him from there.
And with JT, the big game's going to come, right? He's going to have a game this playoff series or this playoff run where he goes for like 45 plus, right? It's happened the past 2 years, and he's due for it. So I think for me, I'm not really looking for the scoring numbers really moving forward here. I know that will come. I know he'll have a big moment. I'm more so looking for when Tatum's shot's not falling, or I don't want to say it's not falling tonight because it really was just his 3-point shot. He was 1 of 8 from behind the arc. And 6 of 10, it was my math right, 6 of 11 from the 2. So it's like his 3-pointer wasn't falling, but he really was controlling everything. And I want to triple up on the double team thing, right? Because I mean, there was one specific play where he had the ball in the first half at the post, but like a little bit more to the left side, Celtics bench side, and he was guarded by Caleb, and Jaime Jaquez was guarding Jaylen Brown at the top of the wing, and they were showing, and Tatum was just waiting, and he was being so patient. And I remember 2 plays later, Jaylen Brown was in that same situation, and if he had made the pass, JB, a little bit faster to kick out to White, there would have been an open 3, but he didn't. And I remember sitting there thinking, I was like, wow, that's the evolution of Tatum's game right there, was that Tatum was so, his timing on the double team has gotten down to like perfection, where it's like if you're going to double him, he's going to make you pay. And a lot, the Heat were, the Heat switched up coverages on JT. It went from Hami, it went to Bam, it went to, they were really switching it up. And the second half, they brought a lot of Kevin Love and Bam double teams to kind of get that length and maybe intercept passing lanes. I thought Tatum did a phenomenal job tonight. Really just being able to stay the course and handle those properly. Something I do want to talk about too, guys. The Heat in turnovers with the Celtics feel like it's been like an everlasting problem for the past 3-4 years now. Tonight, the Celtics, they took care of the basketball, and they had, I believe, 7 turnovers for the game. I'm going to double check. They had 10, 7 of which came in that fourth quarter, which obviously kind of we talked about. It was just when you get lackadaisical, the Heat are going to pounce. But Heat zone is something that has terrified and haunted the Celtics. Obviously, Kristaps Porzingis might help that. But tonight, how do you guys think the Celtics improved against that Heat zone? Obviously, probably Kristaps, but I feel like a little bit more went into it.
I think Tatum getting rid of the basketball as fast as he did, especially off double teams, helps. The way to beat zone is to shoot well and to pass the ball quickly with efficiency and movement, and the Celtics had all those things in spades. I think the one way they could improve upon it a little bit would be to have Tatum start on the block a little bit more, because teams are so petrified of Tatum driving to the basket against, for example, a zone or against a smaller defender, that's why they're sending so many doubles at him. So if you started the motion a little bit sooner and had him on the block, that also strikes fear. And if they double out of that, let them do it. You'll have a corner 3 wide open. So I feel like that would be my one caveat with, if I want to see something a little bit more frequently throughout the rest of the series, it's Tatum a little bit more on the foul line and whatnot. Have him more as a decoy, or if you do get it down to him, have him quickly make an action. But yeah, I think the shooting really helps. And I think Hauser, specifically in that corner, when he hit those 4 threes and whatever it was, like an 8-minute stretch, that was really dramatic, because Miami's like, oh man, okay, because last year Hauser couldn't hit the side of a barn. And now you have Hauser, Holiday, Pritchard, Horford. You have these excellent shooters occupying these corners. You can't really sell out as much on that anymore, because we saw it today where Miami's offense for parts of this game wasn't as bad as the 94 looks, but a lot of it has to do with what's their best offensive weapon. It's Bam. And what is he best at? Those push shots and those mid-range jumpers. You can't trade those with corner threes, because Boston will run you out of the gym, and that's what happened today. So I feel like the way the zone's concerned, I don't think it's going to be nearly as much of a big of a deal, especially without Jimmy, who's really excels at being kind of that free safety in the zone. So what I'm looking forward to seeing in the Miami defense is seeing how they play Tatum, because I'm curious to see if they kind of pull it back a little bit with the doubles and try to force Tatum to take a step back with that playmaking and make him score a few more points. We saw teams do this with Jokic, where the rap on Jokic for a little while was make him be a score first guy, because he gets uncomfortable, because he's such an excellent passer and he sees the game through a pass first lens. Whereas if he has to score every time, sometimes that can mess with his mind. I'm curious to see if Spoelstra does something similar to Tatum.
I don't really have anything else to add. I think you covered it perfectly. KP makes all the difference in the world in terms of zone, in terms of how teams are guarding the Celtics. If you switch out Marcus Smart and you don't have KP in the middle of the zone, and just KP's ability to stretch the floor, shoot from 35 feet. I think he hit like pump fake, step back 3, just ridiculousness.
Yeah.
So just having that ability as a big man on the floor is going to make all the difference in terms of, and we've seen it, all this year. It changes completely how teams have to guard this team.
Well, it's funny because I don't think you can, it makes no sense. Like the basics of basketball, right? When a team's a good 3-point shooting team, you don't run zone, right? It's like the one thing you don't do. You stick man and you run them off the 3-point line. But I think the problem that Miami, and I think that was, you saw them kind of switch instantly into the zone after that 14-0 Celtics start. And once Boston figured out the zone and the shots fell, they switched back to man in that third quarter. And then the Celtics went on a 35-17 run in that third and just really extended the lead. So it's like, if you're Miami, I think your best direction here with the Celtics is sit in zone and hope they don't make their open shots. And maybe you can win a game, because how I see it is you're not guarding this team 5 out, because the way Miami got us last year was they were kind of able to hunker down in the paint with Robert Williams being back there and Horford kind of losing his legs. He lost his legs in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. So it's like now this year's Celtics team, you got 5 guys who are threats at the 3-point line. You know, which guy are you going to be okay with giving up a 3 out of the Celtics 8 rotational players? Like every single one, if you leave open, you're thinking to yourself, shit, I left him open. Right? Like there's not a guy that you're thinking that you're comfortable with. And I think that's why you're probably not going to see Tillman. But for the Heat, it's like, I think you just kind of have to hope and pray the Celtics don't make their threes for a game, because if you sit in that man, oh my God. I mean, you saw it tonight. I mean, we were getting anything and everything we wanted because Bam Adebayo can't sit home free at the rim and just, disrupt shots, because if he does, this team has the self-awareness and the tools now to kick out to a wide open standing Porzingis to get the ball rotate. Like it's just, it's a much more complete team. And I think it's very apparent for the Heat, but I think moving 4 games too, I'm interested to see how Boston responds, because again, on Miami side, everyone's thinking, all right, how can Miami adjust? How can Miami, react to what this is? But I kind of felt like tonight, the Celtics, those drive spells, you're giving Miami tools. So I'm interested. 49 threes. And again, they're giving them to us. There weren't 49 bad threes. They're honestly like 46 really good threes. But is that maybe not the direction to go? I don't know. It's like, I feel like the talent distribution between the Celtics and the Heat is so high. The Celtics could shoot threes every time down the court and probably still walk away with a sweep here.
I think offensive rebounding was a big part of the first half. And JJ Redick mentioned on the broadcast that the easiest time to shoot a 3 is off a scramble on an offensive rebound because guys are unaccounted for. And I think that was a big part of the kind of balloon numbers, especially early on. To answer the question in full, yeah, they need to get to the rim more. And I think part of it is the Jason Tatum piece I mentioned, because he's starting the offense kind of on that left wing. For whatever reason, he likes to go to that left wing more often than not. And I think if he started it at the top of the key and was able to do more pick and roll action with Porzingis, or if he started on the low block, that could unlock the paint a little bit more. And Porzingis had an excellent game. He really did. Right. He spaced out Bam tremendously. I don't think he got enough paint touches. And this has been something that I've been harping on for 2 months now. And Missoula said it would change. And it didn't change today, but again, it didn't have to, because Porzingis was nailing his triples, and it was a big part of this game, the fact that Porzingis was kind of stretching Bam out the way he was. But I just want to see Porzingis get to the line a little bit more and get some of those low paint touches, because when he does that, he's also a very talented passer, and you can have action off him. You can have guys cut in. We've seen this action where they dump it off to Porzingis down low, and Brown kind of sprints in and he has a look at the basket, or Tatum makes a quick cut and he has a mid-range, or the corners are open for 3. You've seen a lot of Porzingis kickouts to Hauser and Pritchard, for example. So I feel like that kind of action needs to be at least worked on coming up, because I don't want to see Boston just play Miami straight up. And what I mean by that is this is a marathon, not a sprint. You know you're better than this team. You know you're going to win this series. Even if Boston played 70%, and I think there's an argument to be made that today they played 80%-ish. No, regardless of how well the threes fell, right. Your 2 best players didn't have A games, both of them, in my opinion. So start to work on things that you're going to need throughout the playoffs. And I think one of those things is getting to the rim. And who does that better than Jason Tatum on this team? Who does that better than sealing deep, low in the paint, getting those easy buckets like Kristaps Porzingis? I want to see more of that.
Something I was really impressed with, and I'm going to give credit to Joe Mazzulla here. They had a clear game plan, and the game plan was really flawless. And they Bam in the high pick and roll really early, which in conceptually makes no sense. You're like, why would you put the Heat's best defender in a high pick and roll? And essentially what it allowed Boston to do was to space out the floor and get to the rim. And I was very impressed by they were taking Miami's last line of defense out of the equation. And I was very impressed by that because I will say it set the tone for the game. Boston went on that 14-0 run, and only one of those buckets was a 3-point attempt. It obviously in the original purpose was a Jason Tatum attack to the rim. It just so happens that he got blocked and the ball found Jaylen Brown for a wide open sitting three. So it's like, for me, I think that was something I was concerned about. Is Boston's game plan just going to be come out there and chuck threes? And technically it was tonight, right? They shot 49 threes, but it was so obvious that the game plan at hand was the Celtics were taking what the defense was giving them. And I think that was very impressive. It wasn't isolation step back threes. It wasn't dribble the ball out for, 18 seconds or Xavier dribbled the air out of the basketball, right? You love to say that. That didn't happen tonight. And I think that is the Celtics playing their best ball, is when they're moving the ball, they're running, they're spacing right. And I was very impressed. And, you say 80%, I'd give them like 85. So I like that range, right in that 80 to 85 range. I thought Tatum had an A game. I thought Jaylen Brown might have had like a C+ game. Call me nuts, but
that might be generous.
Right. Yeah. So I think he was he came to life in that third, but again, really impressed with Joe Mazzulla's game plan tonight.
I think the thing with Jaylen Brown, and I want to touch on him, I was not impressed by him at all. That'd be my only real concern about this game was he lit it up for like 35 seconds, and it was awesome. You're like, oh my God, Jaylen Brown turning into a leaf. He looks comfortable against the Miami Heat. He's dribbling with his left hand. He's taking it hard to the rim. And then he looked absolutely erratic. The ball's going off his shoe again, and you're like, here we go. Not this again. He's dribbling it up to his head. You're like, okay, this is not great. And I think what you said actually calmed my nerves a little bit. I think maybe he was just a little bit too excited. He smelled blood in the water. He knows his team is so much better. He understands that, okay, I need redemption. So perhaps he's a little bit too amped up for this. But yeah, I thought his box score looked way better than how he actually performed. Defensively, he was pretty solid. But even then, I think there were some moments he was trailing on Hero on one play where he could have easily cut in front of him and he was kind of late to recover. There's just some stuff with him that I was like, okay, man, you can't do this the whole playoffs. We're going to need like at least 20% more out of you at bare minimum. And I understand that everyone kind of feels bad for Jaylen Brown because of how bad he was last year. And I understand because, look, Jaylen Brown's beloved. He does a lot for this city. He does a lot for this community. He does a lot for this team. And everyone wants him to succeed. But at some point, you're going to have a serious run in this playoffs, especially on a team that wants to contend for a title and beat the Denver Nuggets here. And I think what I'm seeing from him right now is a guy that the moment's a little bit too big still. That's what it is, right? And I need him to have a good game too. I really need him to have a good game too, because he needs to be a little bit more controlled. And I need to trust him. If there's a play in this game where there's momentum on the line and you have the ball in your hands, I need you to make the right move. And I can't have the ball go over your head, and I can't have you pass it to the third row, and I can't have it off your shoe and for Donnie Wahlberg to catch it.
Well, let me say this about Jaylen is and this might sound nuts, but I'm not really worried about him because Miami takes away exactly Jaylen Brown's strength. And it's like these weird 2-on-3, 3-on-2s, like mini fast breaks that really aren't a fast break. It's just like a quick off the rim and go type. It's like not a fast break, but Jaylen Brown succeeds and excels so highly in that situation where he's able to kind of use his strength in his body to get to the lane and get to the cup. I think Miami, what they're so good at is disrupting those driving lanes. They're so handsy and their timing is, and honestly, it's amazing that Spoelstra is able to really hound that in on those guys because every player knows exactly when to poke for the ball. And Jaylen Brown, who's a guy that relies heavily, I think, off the dribble penetration, mini fast break, attacks to the rim. I think it might be a rough series for JB, but then I think against Cleveland and I think against New York or wherever you might see, I think he's going to pick it up. But I will say, definitely agree with you. Want to see a good game out of Jaylen Brown. You obviously don't want to see a bad game. But I think for me, I'm kind of prepared for maybe this just to be a rougher series for Jaylen just because of how Miami kind of handles itself on the defensive end.
Yeah, and I hear you there. I think the thing with Jaylen Brown is he's just so erratic all the time, and it feels like he's speeding himself up. And I think at times this season, I kind of thought that was going away. In the first game in a playoff series against Miami, it seems to revert back to itself. So I
Right.
think that's just the natural concern for me. But yeah, I think there was some stuff he did well today. I think he was confident going to the basket, even though he had mixed success doing it. He at least had the energy to attack Bam, to attack Jaime Jaquez or Kevin Love, whoever was down there. And I think with Jaylen, the whole thing with him, is just, can you just calm down sometimes? Can you just play within the offense? You don't need to dribble the air out of the basketball. You don't need to do 40 behind the back up fakes. Just play your game, play normal, understand like everyone else has bought into this style and this team. And
Right.
regardless of sometimes if it's too many threes or the timeouts, whatever it is, it's worked. They won 64 games. They just blew out Miami to win their first game in the playoffs. But can Jaylen just buy in a little bit more? That'd be my thing moving forward.
Well, I actually have a question. So why is it that the NBA decides all of a sudden to like revert back to their like 80s rules as soon as the Celtics see the Heat in the first round? It's like, why is it that we sit here for like 4 years?
If you look, you can go back. I think there's I saw it on Twitter. You can go back. There is a memo sent out by the league office February or March saying that they were cracking down on offensive players and like the advantage they have. And you can go back and you will see a drastic shift in the amount of fouls called ever since that memo was sent out.
It's just like why does that have to happen?
It's not a playoff thing. I think I can try to
I'm
find
okay with though, but why is it that like it happens right as we see Miami in the first? Right now, obviously, again, it's not like I'm worried about. I'm not saying this. It's like a what are the odds that now the NBA is like, okay, yeah, actually we're a defensive league, and it's like, well, actually it really would have helped if we were getting these foul calls against Miami because they play. I mean, they're a dirty team. It's so obvious. I think that Miami's is such a dirty team.
I think my biggest gripe with it, besides the fact it comes in the middle of the season, which is just kind of annoying at that, is it's so wildly inconsistent. There was like the up fake foul call. The Celtics got twice. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum both got one. And you're like, okay, that's a little bit more, cookie cutter, a little touchier. And then guys will go to the rim and get hacked and won't get a call. So you're like, okay, so where's the line here? What are we calling? What aren't we calling? Because it's wildly inconsistent. And for once, I want to defend the officials because they had to change how the entire game was called halfway through the season.
Sure.
So
no doubt.
It's kind of tough for them to just kind of adjust and figure out what the league wants. I think what I'm hoping for as a fan is there's some happy medium. I don't want touch fouls, but I don't want Jason Tatum to go to the rim and get clobbered in the head. I think there needs to be some sort of intermediary that's like, okay, this was 2 or 3 years ago for the first like 20 games of the season. They tried something similar to this, and you can look this up too. And it was really, really good. And then all of a sudden they kind of just reverted back to the touch fouls. I'd like for the free throw rate to remain somewhere in the middle because, again, these guys are so talented offensively that they can draw fouls. And I understand that. But at the same time, if you initiate contact yourself, maybe you can make that not a call. And I think no one would really complain about that. But you shouldn't be getting clobbered around the basket and just, playoff basketball. That's just how it is. That's just kind of silly to me.
Well, I do love, like for me, the regular season, it's like you see all these fouls. You're like, all right, protect the players maybe. And I think the NBA has always done a good job in the regular or the postseason at just kind of like stop blowing the whistle. Because honestly, I think that's why Joel Embiid hasn't succeeded much in the postseason, but that's a different conversation for a different
Harden
day.
Too.
Right. I mean, there's a clear correlation. I think the product that the NBA has is so good, and you ruin it with every whistle that is blown. So I could see I need some more consistency.
I got it. I found it. The league office outline. This is an article from Woj, March 15th, 2024. In a meeting with the NBA's competition committee on Tuesday, the league office outlined an increased officiating focus on offensive players hunting out fouls and veering off pathways to the basket into defenders, and how those points of emphasis have impacted a decrease in league scoring. The officiating focuses were outlined in January and February in a memo that the league shared with referees and team officials. In the memo, the league describes itself as continuing to evaluate the state of offensive versus defensive balance with a focus on legal guarding. And since then, this is in the 3 weeks that after the memo was sent out, there's a 4-point per team decline in scoring and a 1.9 decrease in fouls per team called in just those recent weeks. So I'm assuming that trend continued and has continued into April now.
Well, yeah. So I guess for Boston, it's whether or not they can take them because we have a couple guys that love to complain about the calls and whatnot. But as for tonight, it was all Celtics tonight, guys. I mean, despite that little hiccup they had in that fourth quarter, the Celtics were really able to come out and make a statement win in game one against the Miami Heat, 114-94. Jason Tatum led the way for the Celtics. He had 23 points and a triple-double to go alongside that. Derek White tagged along with a quiet 20 points from D. White tonight. The Celtics will go off and play the Miami Heat back at the TD Garden. That will be on Wednesday, April 24th at 7 p.m. Catch us live after the game. This game will be on TNT, guys. So, the next 3 will actually be on TNT. So fingers crossed that the Celtics are able to, hunker down and win game 2. We'll have you covered, like I said, after the final buzzer sounds right back here for Celtics Talk Weekly post-game show. I'm Rob. Next to me is my man Xavier, and all the way down there to the right is Zach. Guys, until next time, you know the deal, man. Go Celtics.